If you have a true scary story you want to share, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it my way. And of course, thank you. About a decade ago, my college buddies and I decided to reunite for a weekend camping trip. So, 4 people total. We had all kind of gotten lost in the craziness of adult life, and as such, we hadn't had time to really see each other or get together. And what better way to catch up after a few years than to spend some time in the wilderness, right? We live near some pretty decent lakes, and determined that spending some time out there was the best idea. A couple nights spent around a campfire, under the stars, in the middle of pretty much nowhere was going to be a good time. We arrived on the planned Friday afternoon. It was a decently warm day, and we found our spot, where we were going to set up, just off the main trail in a clearing in the open forest. A perfect spot for us to set up our tents. We did so, and after a few hours decided to get the fire going, even though it was still fairly warm out. The sun was mostly set, the sky was that nice orange-pink that it gets when the night comes, and we were just sitting there reminiscing about the good old days. As the night progressed, we were all sitting around and starting to grow tired, when one of the guys, Kevin, jumped up a bit and asked, "Hey, did you guys hear that?" I turned to him and asked what he meant. He then said that there was a sound in the woods. I listened for a moment, but didn't hear anything out of the ordinary. Just the sounds of a night in the woods. Crickets, owls, nothing too crazy. I mentioned that he may have just heard a deer or something, but I could tell by his face that he didn't think it was a deer. We got back to the conversation, but I could tell that Kevin was a bit on edge. After about 5 or so more minutes, I heard the sound, and I turned to Kev and saw him with the same look on his face from earlier, which told me that I had heard what he heard. I turned around to see if I could see anything, and much to my surprise, I did. I saw some movement off to the side. Someone was walking toward us. I mentioned that there was someone walking our way to the group, and everyone else turned towards where I was looking, all of us squinting to see who was approaching from the darkness of the woods. One of the guys even asked, "Who's there?" A man stepped into the light where we could finally see him, and he looked like a fairly normal guy. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie. He looked clean-shaven, and like he was just an everyday dude. My initial thought was that he was another camper that maybe had heard us talking, and he was coming over to visit, or something. He didn't seem threatening at first, just a bit out of place. Marcus stood up and asked, "Hey man, can we help you?" He sounded friendly but cautious, which told me that he was thinking the same thing I was. At first, the guy didn't respond. He just looked at all of us for a moment, kind of taking all of us in individually. Then he said, "I'm just passing through. Mind if I warm up by the fire for a moment?" Something about him put me on edge, but Marcus responded quickly with, "Yeah man, that's fine." The guy smirked and sat down by the fire, kind of away from the rest of us, and he just stared at the flames. Like, intensely stared. The 4 of us tried to keep the conversation going, but it felt kind of awkward. Like we were all talking over an uninvited guest. After a couple of minutes of just staring at the fire, the man stood up and said, "Thanks for letting me sit here. You folks have a good night." Without even a glance. He just started walking back the way he'd come. As he walked off, Kev kinda chuckled and said, "Well, that was weird, huh?" We all sort of laughed and agreed, but thought it was just a thing that maybe happened, and that we were going to move on. Just as we were starting to ease back into our relaxation, The sounds from earlier came back, but this time it was louder and more prominent. We all turned in the direction we thought it was coming from and were all taken aback when we saw 3 guys all walking our ways, all wearing masks, and all of them armed. One of them spoke up as they approached. "All right, everyone, nice and easy. We don't want trouble. Just give us your valuables and no one has to get hurt." We all stood up and kind of huddled together. Normally the 4 of us weren't cowardly, but these guys all had guns, and they clearly meant business. Marcus tried to tell them that we didn't have much on us, that we were just camping for a couple of days, but one of the guys raised his weapon and said, "I didn't ask what you had. I told you to give us all of your belongings. Now empty your pockets and your bags." We all did as we were told, our hands shaking in the thought that we may actually not make it out of this alive plaguing us. They took our wallets, our cell phones, and literally everything else they could find. They even grabbed the cooler and took all of our food. After a few moments of them rifling through what we had, one of them nodded at the others and said something about that being good enough. The third guy then said something that made me nearly piss myself. "Should we go ahead and just put him down?" When he said this, I couldn't help but go into pleading mode. "Whoa, guys, come on now. You got our stuff. We're in the middle of nowhere. We all have families that'll miss us. Can we just call it good? You got what you wanted, right? No need to turn this into a full-blown homicide." I wasn't really sure what I was saying. I was just talking and trying to get them to move on without pulling the trigger. They all paused and turned to look at each other for a few moments, and then back at us. The one that asked if they should put us down kind of shrugged at the other 2, and then one of them said, "All right, fine, but you all need to leave. If I ever see you around here again, you won't be so lucky." With that, they all started walking away with our stuff, and after a few seconds, they had melted into the night and were completely gone, leaving us shaken, but mostly unharmed. We sat there for a moment in silence, the 4 of us just thinking about what to do when Kev finally said, "We should probably go." We all agreed. We put out the fire and packed up our tents, literally the only things we had left, and made our way back to where the car was parked. Thankfully, Marcus had the car's key in his pocket, and since it was an older car, it was just a plain metal key with no fob, and was small enough that they didn't notice he had it on him, because they likely would have taken that too. We got to the car, and when Marcus asked where we should go, I mentioned that a police station was probably the best bet, or at least somewhere close by with a phone so we could call 911 to report the incident. To this day, we still talk about that night whenever we get together. We've all pretty much refused to go camping since it happened, even though it's been over a decade at this point. None of our stuff was ever recovered, and I don't think the guys were ever found. I don't know if they were willing to go through with the plan of actually killing us, or if that was just a scare tactic. But if so, it definitely worked. We were scared. The whole thing felt like a wrong place, wrong time kind of situation, and my guess is that the first guy was the scout for the other 3. Or I guess he could have been one of them and he was trying to see if we were worth the time. In the end, I'm just glad that we all made it out alive. Terrified, but alive, nonetheless. In late autumn, my friends and I decided to have one last bonfire before the winter chills set in. One last chance to get out and be stupid at night before it got too cold or started snowing. None of us are fans of winter. We're definitely a summer flock, so we were wanting to squeeze one more good night out of the season. We had a usual spot where we would get together, part of the property owned by Sarah's grandparents, out behind their little cabin-like thing that they have going on. It's secluded, quiet, There aren't any city lights or people to deal with, just the four of us and the fire and the wilderness. That night started off great. We set up our tents, got a decent pile of wood and sticks to burn, and got the fire going as the sun was starting to set. My boyfriend, Kenneth, did most of the work for setting up the fire as he was the most well-versed in survival tactics. Sarah's boyfriend, Les, was more interested in getting drunk, while Sarah and I helped where we could. Once the fire was ready to go, we sat around just talking about whatever and roasting marshmallows, as cliché demands. After a while, Les drunkenly said that he wanted to tell a scary story, so we shifted to that. Les went, I told some dumb urban legend story that I remembered, and then Sarah started telling us about this time that she swore she saw a figure at the foot of her bed as a kid. It was pretty creepy. Even creepier when she mentioned that she didn't make it up, that one night she'd had this really weird sleep paralysis, and swore that there was basically a shadow demon at the foot of her bed, smiling at her and just watching her sleep. It was a good spooky time, but we were all laughing and just having a good time. About an hour or so later, we were all resigned to heading to sleep. Kenneth and I started to get our stuff gathered, and when he went to put out the fire, Les asked what he was doing. He told him that we needed to put it out before we went to sleep, but Les told him to leave it for a while, and that he didn't want to go to bed quite yet, so he would put it out when he was tired. Kenneth told him that that didn't sound like a good idea, and that he seemed a bit too drunk and that he should go to bed. But Les was adamant that he would be fine. He stood up and started hopping on one foot, saying, "See?" Like that feat was something that only could be done by someone that was sober. And then laughed, saying that we could all go to sleep, but he wasn't tired. Sarah said that she wanted to go to sleep, and Les just waved her off, saying, "I'll join you in a bit. I just want to enjoy the fire a little more." I could tell that he was starting to go from adamant to drunkenly annoyed, so I just told Kenneth that he'd be alright, mentioned the bucket of water to put it out to Les, and said that we should all get to sleep. They both hesitantly agreed, and we went into our respective tents. Myself and Kenneth in one, and Sarah in theirs. I swear no sooner than I fell asleep did we hear a bone-chilling scream coming from outside, followed by a huge string of swearing and, "Help me!" At first, I thought I was just dreaming, but Kenneth jumped up too, and we both quickly shot out of the tent to see Les half in and half out of the fire pit, struggling to get up. His clothes were burning, he was singed, and his face had a look of pure agony. Kenneth yelled out and raced over to try and help him out of the fire. I grabbed the bucket of water to pour on him to put out his clothes, and Sarah was just standing there asking what the hell had happened. Les was really badly burned all over his right arm and leg, and he was just moaning in pain. After a few moments, he was able to finally tell us what happened. Apparently, he had needed to empty his bladder, and he thought that it would be funny to pee on the fire. He had stood up and fully managed to trip over the stump that we used as a chair, and landed straight into the fire pit. Since he was way too inebriated, he flailed and struggled to get out of the fire, not able to focus on his movements with the pain that was surging through his body at that time. That's when he screamed. He'd been in the fire, a well-built fire that was still pretty large, for several moments, before it occurred to him that he could scream for help. Kenneth said that we needed to get him to the hospital immediately, and that the burns on his leg were severe. Sarah grabbed a blanket and wrapped him up in it, careful to avoid his arm. I put out the fire with the remaining water. Thankfully, this was property that belonged to Sarah's grandparents, so we could leave the tents and not have to spend time packing up. We all got in the Jeep, Les and Sarah sitting in the back, me and Kenneth in the front. Every bump and jolt caused Les to groan in agony. Kenneth tried to slow down over every obvious rough patch, but it really didn't matter. When we finally arrived at the emergency room, the staff rushed Les inside. We all sat in the waiting room hoping that he wouldn't be too badly messed up. After a couple of hours later, one of the doctors came out to talk to us about Les. He had mostly second-degree burns, but at least partial third-degree burns on his leg. The fact that he was drunk may have actually helped him not be in severe agony, and he was lucky that he didn't spend any more time struggling in the fire, because it could have been much, much worse. They got him patched up and led us back to see him. Much to our surprise, when we walked in, he actually laughed and said, "Yo, guys, am I the biggest dumbass or what?" We spent the rest of the weekend visiting Les to make sure he was recovering. They kept him over the night to make sure that his severe burns, which were only about 5% of the entire area, didn't get infected, and were tended to properly. The next morning, when he finally sobered up, Les mentioned that he was definitely in a lot of pain, but that he was probably going to be okay. He was apologetic for ruining our little camping trip, but we were just glad that he was fine. Surprisingly, that was the last time I ever saw Les drunk. He definitely was more controlled with his drinking. He has some pretty bad scars on him now from it, but I think he took it as a lesson. Don't get drunk and play with fire, no matter how funny you think it'll be. This happened over 10 years ago, so unfortunately I can't remember all the details or what exactly was said, but I do remember how terrifying the experience was. To explain why I acted, or more accurately didn't act, I'm autistic and suffer from situational mutism. It was a bonfire night, and I was at a fireworks display with my family. I went outside ahead of everyone else and sat in my mom's wheelchair, waiting for the fireworks to start. A little while later, a woman I had never met before left the pub and made her way over to me, carrying 2 drinks, and speaking as though she knew me. So, me being me, I just assumed that she must have been a friend of my mom's. I smiled as she handed me one of the drinks, but I didn't start drinking it. It was beer, which I don't drink, so I continued my habit of assuming and guessed it was for a family member. Then things got weird. Instead of telling me who she was, and that my family were on their way to join us, she began saying and doing some really unsettling things. Like I said at the beginning, I can't remember exactly what she said, but I remember her commenting on how shy I was, and then she began hugging me and kissing the top of my head. Even if I was someone who was okay with physical contact, which I'm not, I would have still found her behavior disturbing. After a while, she noticed that I hadn't touched the drink, that I now realized was mine, and she told me to drink it. By now, I was certain that she wasn't a friend of my mom's, and there was no way I was drinking something handed to me by a stranger. I began pretending to drink and considered my options. Looking back, I could have gotten out of the wheelchair and run back inside, but at the time, I was frozen where I was. It was crowded, and the woman was acting so strangely. All I could think to do was call my mom, so I began fumbling for my phone whenever the woman wasn't watching, and leaving missed calls to my mom, hoping that it would get her to come outside. Unfortunately, it didn't. By this point, a man joined the woman, and I felt completely closed in by both of them. The entire time, the woman's actions and mannerisms made me think that she might have taken something stronger than alcohol, but the man seemed completely sober. All I could think was, there was something in this beer. I was still pretending to drink it, and thank God this wheelchair is an electric one and they wouldn't be able to try to push it away with them. I left my mom constant missed calls, and tried to look around for someone to grab the attention of, when finally my family came out of the pub to join me. At that exact moment, both of the creepy strangers vanished into the crowd. If their behavior hadn't been enough of a red flag, this definitely convinced me that they were up to something shady. I never saw either of them again, but as we were leaving and I explained why I had left so many missed calls on my mom's phone, one of my brothers said that a woman matching the description of the creep had made some creepy comments to him too, earlier on when she was still inside. I don't know it for sure, but I genuinely wonder whether those people were looking for a vulnerable girl to kidnap or even traffic. They never saw me stand up from the wheelchair, so I doubt they knew it wasn't mine, and my appearance and mannerisms unfortunately sometimes make me look like an easy target. I like to think that I've learned how to handle myself a bit better since then, but fortunately, I have not had another experience quite so terrifying since. So that, my friends, was a collection of scary bonfire stories, the second of which I've ever done. Bonfire stories are interesting because you never know what's going to happen. And thankfully, these weren't as terrifying as... Well, they were still pretty downright terrifying. But last year, I know there was one where the guy almost burned down the entire house because he was setting a fire that was too big. I think with gasoline. I think he was dumping gas and it got out of control kind of thing. But yeah, definitely terrifying stories. Bonfires are interesting. They're fun, sure. Little fires to have and enjoy, but I don't know. Whenever it comes to like camping out in the woods, I don't think I would ever do a bonfire unless there were absolutely no trees, grass, or leaves anywhere near the spot. Because you're just asking for trouble. Also, getting drunk and playing with fire is also a terrible idea. Don't do that, in my opinion. I'm not a doctor, so I can't tell you what to not do and what to do. Not that I could if I were a doctor, but it sounded better in my head. I'm almost a doctor. I'm never going to be a doctor. I'm not going back to school, but I'm almost a doctor. Not a medical doctor, but, you know, a doctor. Almost have a doctorate. I have a master's. Anyways, scary bonfire stories. Hopefully you all enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do consider hitting that like button, the little thumbs up button under the video. That helps a lot. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard and want more scary stories like this, consider hitting the subscribe button. You can also leave me a comment down below the video with your thoughts, how you're doing, and what you thought about the video. If you're enjoying the content this month so far, we're a little actually over the halfway mark, so we're doing good, going strong kind of thing, so yeah. Hopefully you are enjoying the content. If not, I understand, but if so, sweet. Then I'm doing the right thing. Even if you don't enjoy it, I'm still doing the right thing, because this is my channel, and I do what I want. And if that means I want to overwork myself and do too much work, it's the same thing, then I'm going to do it. Anyways, subscribe, like, comment, join Patreon and memberships, get early access to content like this and other content if you choose to do so. Thank you. If not, that's totally okay. Super thanks as well is a thing you can do. It's just a tip to the channel. Never expected, always appreciated. And yeah. All that said, my friends, hope you're having a gorgeous week so far. Hope you come back soon to see me. Until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And of course, until I see you again, my friends, much love, and sleep well.